sounds like a story to me. Some crazy fable that you would not believe. Oh, but ain't
Welcome to the Avram Davidson universe, where we listen to some of the greatest stories ever written, adored by Ursula Le Guin, Neil Gaiman, Leonard Nimoy, Ray Bradbury, and Stephen King. Enjoy classic tales such as Are All the Seas with Oysters, The Golem, Sources of the Nile, and many others.
Hello and welcome to the Avram Davidson universe. I'm your host for the week or month, depending on how many episodes we get this month, J. Emery Coleman. I am a sci-fi author, fantasy author, tabletop designer, and podcast host, once radio host, but now I'm here just for you. We've got a great show for you today. We've got The Certificate, written by Avram, and my good friend Ray. Now, Ray's a part-time artist, longtime sci-fi nerd, and tabletop enthusiast like myself. I've interviewed her before for her short films, but hey, we'll see what she has to say about The Certificate. Hey, Ray, how are you? Oh, no.
Oh, hey.
Been big muted.
Okay, hi. Me struggling
So it's a
with
bit hectic.
technology.
We're now, yes, modern technology. Ray and I don't use Zoom very frequently. We're big Discord kids. Despite being, I think, a little bit over the age range in which Discord is marketed. So, anyways, goodness sakes, how are you?
I'm here. Me.
Well, I'm glad you're here. So, I've already given you the introduction. Do you want to give us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm Ray. I do art and tell stories, and I'm trying to think of the third thing.
Well, you don't have to have a third thing.
Okay.
Okay, now, very quickly, I'm going to act as the baker in terms of, as the kids now say, glazing. Ray is a fantastic portraiture artist, focusing mainly on sci-fi, doing a lot of fantasy. Excellent writer, very fun person to be around. So there you go. What are you working on these days?
I have a few projects in the works. Some are mostly passion projects that are going to take a long time to see the light of day.
Mhm.
But I'm trying to work on a couple of comics, so that's fun for me. And also working on a couple of tabletop role-playing stuff. I think those are the
I
most
love to hear
exciting
it.
things.
Also, for those in the audience, I apologize if my audio weaves in and out. This is the first and last hosted episode of the Avram Davidson universe from this desk. I was here when I was interviewing with Seth a month ago, and unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I get to go to a new home office pretty soon. So my mic is now currently in the wrong spot. It should be hovering right here. Unfortunately, it is off camera over there. So if that is a problem, I apologize. But we'll be fixing it. Don't worry about that. Now, Ray, why did you jump for The Certificate?
It was described to me as spooky sci-fi, and I was in the mood for spooky sci-fi. I am a simple creature. But yeah.
Now, I bait and switched you.
Yeah,
For the audience.
That wasn't very spooky of you.
I was going through and trying to snag everything that would be of an interest to Ray, also being a huge Western fan, and I found something. It was one of those casual glances. It was an Avram that I had never read called Revolver that was published in a collection with like 6 other Western stories. And so I made the jump and I went, oh, sweet. And before I checked the synopsis or anything like that, I shot it over to Ray and I said, all right, let's go with this. And then as I was talking to Seth, he goes, oh, that's not a Western. And I was like, oh, no. Oh, no. And so
What
we
was
shot
it,
through.
though?
I think it's
gotta
a
know.
thriller. I definitely
Oh.
want to do Revolver because it's a noir thriller. Avram did a lot
Oh,
of
I like noir
noir type.
too.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I think, oh God, what is it? Take Wooden Indians, I think it was the other one, which is an actual Western. It is incredibly wordy and very long and super good. But as we found out through listening, or well, through reading, we about to listen to, the certificate, Avram's writing is dense, wordy, and there's just a lot of context and subtext to all of his work. So you jump for it because of spooky sci-fi.
Yeah, yeah. I think those were the words that I hung on. I was like, ooh, spooky, sci-fi, wee.
Have you in uh in any way prior to me thrusting this information upon you, have you ever read anything Avram related?
No, not to my knowledge, no.
I will say I was in a very similar boat. I had read a lot of his work through other fantasy magazines, which were from Saga, the Sword and Sorcerer Guild of America. I love those publications. I think it was Flashing Swords. Very solid stuff. A lot of great artists publishing in those. With Avram being, again, one of those guys. So, do you have any stories about how you got into sci-fi as a whole? I know you are a big Star Wars fan and have a lot of other sci-fi, fantasy, and sci-fantasy interests. So, what got you into all those?
Honestly, it was the Star Wars. Because my dad is more of a Star Trek fan. But we had Star Wars in the house. And what got me like reading and more into sci-fi was the Star Wars, because I had friends that are like, oh, here's the Star Wars book. Oh, by the way, the person that wrote this Star Wars book wrote another science fiction, and it's really good. And I read it and I really enjoyed it. So I started reading a bunch of other books.
I mean, hey, that works. I just found a whole bunch of books down in an old moldy box.
Oh.
Into it. Also, I just figured out gallery view. I actually pinned my webcam as the only thing. So I'm sorry, Lance. Lance, our editor, will have to work with that. I much appreciated. You're fantastic. My guy does great work. So, anyways, we're about to get into the certificate. So listen along with us. Enjoy Avram's work. And really dig into it because it's dense. If you have to, pop back and listen to it 2 or 3 times. Shoot, even I had to.
Yeah, I had to do the same.
We'll see you soon.
The Certificate by Avram Davidson. The winter sunrise was still 2 hours away when Dr. Roger Freeman came to stand in front of the great door. By good fortune, incredibly good fortune, he had not been questioned in his furtive progress from the dormitory. If he had been stopped, or if his answer had been either disbelieved or judged inadequate, he might have been sent back to the dorm for punishment. The punishment would have been over, of course, in time for him to go to work at 10 in the morning. But a man could suffer through several thousand eternities of hell in those few hours, and no more than a low muffled groaning and a subdued convulsive movement of the body to show what was going on. You were able to sleep through it, if it was happening to someone else. The great door was set well in from the street, and the cutting edge of the wind was broken by it. Freeman was grateful for that. It was 2 years ago that he had applied for a new overcoat, and the one he still had was ragged even then. Perhaps, if this was not to be his year for escape, in another year he would get the coat. He crowded into a corner and tried not to think of the cold. After a little while another man joined him, then another, then a woman, then a couple. By sunrise there was a long line. They were all willing to risk it, risk punishment for being out before work or for being late to work. Some merely wanted clothes. Some wanted permission to visit relatives in another locale. You could wait years for either. Or you could wait years and not get either. And some, like Freeman, hoped against hope for a chance at escape. Dr. Freeman stared at the door. The design was as intricate as it was incomprehensible. No doubt it made sense to the Hedorans. If you could understand it, you might gain some understanding of the nature of their distant home, if you cared. It was 50 years since they had arrived, and men still knew almost nothing about them. They were here. They would never go away. That was enough. The man behind Dr. Freeman collapsed. No one paid any attention to him. After a moment there was a high, brief humming. The man twitched, opened his eyes. He got to his feet. And then the door opened. "Proceed in the order," the voice directed, a thick, flat, Hedoran voice, harsh yet glutinous. No one tried to push ahead. The lesson had been too well learned. Dr. Freeman got on the third escalator, rode down 2 levels. There had been a time when you rode up, but that was before the Hedorans came. They didn't like tall buildings, at least it seemed so. They'd never explained that or anything else. What they did not like, they simply destroyed. Dr. Freeman looked behind him as he approached the office. There must have been at least a dozen people behind him. They looked at him wolfishly. So few certificates were granted, and he was first in line. He looked away. He'd stayed awake all night in order to be the first. No one had the right to resent him. And the next man in line was young. What did he expect? The door opened. The voice said, "Proceed one at a single time." 50 years, and the Hedorans still hadn't mastered the language. They didn't have to, of course. Roger Freeman entered the office, took the application form from the slot in the wall machine found in every office, sat down at the table. When was the last time he had sat in a chair? No matter. The form was in Hedoran, of course. The voice said, "Name?" The voice said, "Number?" He wrote it down. Roger Freeman, 655-673-60602. Idly he glanced at the cluster of Hedoran characters. If one could take the application form away, with Hedoran questions and English answers, perhaps, if there was time, a key could be found for translating. But it was impossible to take it away. If you spoiled it, you were out. You could apply only once a year. And if you did find out how to read their language, what then? Freeman's brother Bob had talked of rebellion, but that was years ago, and he didn't like to think what had happened to Bob. And besides, he hadn't time. He had to be at work by 10. From 10 in the morning until 10 at night, the Hedorans had their own ways of reckoning time. He worked at a machine, pulling hard on levers. Some he had to bend down to reach. Some he had to mount steps to reach. Up and down, up and down. He didn't know what the machine did or even how it worked, and he no longer cared. He no longer cared about anything except a new overcoat, or at least a newer one, not worn so thin, and his chances of escape. Age, occupation, previous occupation, Previous to the arrival of the Hedorans, that was. 50 years ago he had been a physician, an obsolete skill. Inside of every man nowadays there was a piece of something. Presumably it communicated with a machine somewhere deep in the Hedoran quarters. If you broke a bone or bled, or even if you just fainted, as the young man behind him in line had, you were set right almost in the second. No one was ill for long. Even worn-out organs were regenerated. Too few men had been left alive, and the Hedorans needed those who were left too much to let them sicken or die. At last the long form was filled out. The harsh voice said, "Now, at once, to Office 10, Level 4. And Dr. Freeman hastily obeyed. When they said "at once," they meant just that. The punishment might come like a single whiplash, or it might go on and on. You never knew. Maybe the Hedorans knew, but they never told. The man next behind the outer door scuttled in as Freeman left. The others waited. Not more than 3 could expect to be processed before it would be time to return to work. Office 10, Level 4, asked him the same questions, but in a different order. He was then directed to Office 5, Level 17. Here his 2 forms were fed into a machine, returned with markings stamped on them in Hedoran. "Office 8, Level 2, the voice said. There he fed his applications into the slot. After a moment they came back, unmarked. "Name, Roger Freeman. Number, 655-673-60602. You have a single-time application outstanding, unpermitted, 2. You will cancel this one, or you will cancel that one." Frantically he searched his mind. What application did he have outstanding? When was this rule made? The overcoat! If he went ahead with this new application and it was refused, he'd have to wait till next year to reinstate the one for the coat. And then more years of waiting. It was cold. The dormitory was ill-heated. He had no blanket. His present coat was very worn. Services for humans were minimal. But he had to proceed with this new application. He was first in line. "Speak," the thick, flat voice directed. "Answer! Speak! Now!" Gobbling his words in haste, Freeman said, "I cancelled the one outstanding." "Insert forms." He did. Waited. "Proceed to Office 10, Level 4. That was the second place he'd been to. A mistake? No matter, he had to go. Once again he entered, and waited. A grunting noise caught his eye. He looked up, started, cowered. A Hedoran, his baffle screen turned off, was gazing at him. The blank, grey, faceted eyes in the huge head, and the body like a deformed fetus. Then the baffle screen went on again. Freeman shuddered. One rarely saw them. It had been years. A piece of paper slid from the machine. He took it up, waiting for the command to proceed. Where? Unless it could be accomplished before 10, there was no chance of escape for him this year, none whatever. He stared dully at the strange characters. The cold, indifferent voice said, "Name, Roger Freeman. Number, 655-673-60602. Declared surplus. Application for death certificate is granted. Proceed for certificate to Office 1, Level 5, at once." Tears rolled down Dr. Freeman's cheeks. "At last," he sobbed joyfully. "At last." and then he hastily left. He had achieved his escape, after all, but only if he got there before 10 o'clock. That was The Certificate, written by Avram Davidson, narrated by David Pickering.
So what do you think?
It was interesting.
Ooh, damning by false praise.
It is very dense. It's a lot to get through. I'm trying to think of like very specific things.
While you're cooking on it, that's something I tend to like about Avram's work, especially a lot of his early stuff, where it has an incredible amount of layered subtext and context for his work. As I said before, we listened to it, especially with The Certificate being this kind of strange look at human bureaucracy through an invading alien force. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's
just the mundanity and the stress, even down to the guy not being able to get his coat without government approval. I think that is, or oversight approval. I think that's wild.
Yeah.
Incredible stuff. But that type of layering is something I really appreciate. I reference it all the time. One of Avram's first works was The Golem, which was just the strangest, like, slapstick trio, not slapstick, but more of an old sitcom type writing that you would see in like the 40s and 50s that is just endlessly funny. But it's not what I think. It's about what you think. And you're collecting your thoughts right now. You're picking them up off the forest floor into a little basket.
The basket's got holes. I'm doing my best here.
That's fine. You're doing well.
Yeah, it was very interesting. The amount that our guy had to go through to do something very simple, even with the coat. I mean, the end result was not I wouldn't say simple, but it definitely, I think that's what made me have to go back for a second listen. So when I heard Death Certificate, I was like, hold on.
Yeah.
Can we rewind a
the
bit?
idea that they build this up over the entire story, and what he's actually going in for is the ability to no longer live in this horrible oppressive society. But hey, even if he doesn't get approved, he can get his coat next year, maybe. And that's a maybe. It's a hard maybe.
Yeah.
But it's a distinct possibility.
Yeah. I think, yeah, that was one of the reasons why I had to go back. Is just like, oh, wait, he asked for a death certificate. Okay. I was listening,
there are people
but I missed something
behind him.
Yeah, there were so many people behind
There's like
him.
a dozen people behind him.
I think he said something like, oh, only 3 of them are going to get approved or are actually let in.
It's unlucky. So if you were working on a short film or a work based on The Certificate, I know you've already got comics in the way or in the works. And as I introduced you, I talked about your time making home films and short films. How would you adapt this work?
I mean, my favorite is the I was gonna say visual arts, but that includes films. But I yeah.
That's how I can call myself a visual artist. When all of these incredibly talented painters are around me and I point a camera at things.
But I really like films that show don't tell. So more of just kind of showing how life is instead of like, yes, we have to queue up so we can maybe get a coat this year, and that kind of thing.
I
It's
think the
just
fun
kind of
thing
like,
about the certificate is that it's mostly internal dialogue, so it could be
yeah.
done without anything outside of the loudspeaker. You could make this 10 minutes, you could make it 5 minutes, it could be a half hour.
Just a lot of kind of like showing how the world is, and maybe like start with the aliens initial takeover.
Mhm.
Just kind of get a like a timeline of like, hey, this has been going on for a while.
Mhm.
And that kind of thing.
So
And
if you had carte blanche and you could cherry pick anyone for the role of our intrepid Dr. Robert Freeman, who would you go for?
cherry pick an
That's difficult.
actor.
Yeah.
I don't know names and no faces.
Well, I know names and faces. Give me one. A guy from blank. Let's go.
Unfortunately, the only one that's popping up is Wolverine.
Hugh Jackman?
Hugh Jackman, yes.
I would love to see massively jacked Hugh Jackman do a role as like this kind of like sallow, nerdier
Sad.
doctor in like a beaten. I had a really weird one when I was reading it, and it was Gunnar Wright in my head. Gunnar Wright is an incredibly talented actor who his most recent stuff has been the Dead Space series, where he's the main guy, Isaac.
Oh.
And he's got that very beleaguered everyman vibe to him, and very kind of a harshness to his portrayals. But the craziest thing about it is you could effectively, this is one of those projects, I think, when you're going through filmmaking, you look into projects that can be done on like $1,000 budget. And I think this is one of those that you can definitely do with like $100 worth of miniatures, some really inventive camera work, and a little bit of post-processing. And it'll work. As long as you have a lead with a strong physical presence, it'll work. Honestly, I really hope somebody jumps for it. That would be super cool. Shoot, I might do that. Okay, everybody redact that. Forget what I've said. You can't do this. It's prohibitively expensive. It would be
My
so
idea
crazy.
now. Don't touch.
Yeah. That's how the arts works. We could just say no touch. That's mine.
And it totally works 100%.
But yeah, I mean, if you could grab a style for that, what would you go for? Would you try to go for something minimalist, something with a great expanse to it? As I know you're talking about showing the initial invasion, or at least an allusion to it.
Yeah, I think I'd want more of a minimalist style. Definitely, like if you end up showing the invasion, it would have to be a little bit more, because that's invasions are never small and quiet. So
That's true.
So that would probably be like the most over the top that you'd ever see. But it would mostly just be like the initial invasion, and then I don't know, kind of like how you'd have like the little TV clips where you're like panning through a room and you see the TV and it's like reporting on the news. Just kind of like that jazz. Being like, yes, and they've put in the number controls now. So if you want something, you have to go here. Obviously, a more reporter-esque voice and line delivery than what I just did. But
I have a feeling, yeah. I got it. Very, very War of the Worlds radio broadcast energy that you're bringing to it, and I like that.
Oh, funny enough, that's a film I haven't seen.
Oh, I'm not talking about the film. I'm talking about the radio broadcast. But
I haven't even.
The film is so vastly different.
Oh,
It is a much it is a very Independence Day.
Now
film.
Independence Day is fun, but it's meant to be fun. Like
Yes.
there's obviously like
is very specifically, it is a post 9/11 Independence Day. It is a very raw movie. That's going really hard. Which I highly suggest it. I really like that film, despite it being kind of goofy. Tom Cruise is fantastic in that. Also, he is doing a terrible Boston accent like the whole film.
Was it like my
But-
Boston accent, where it's really bad, but you can't stay in it?
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. Very much
A
so.
for effort,
You're
but that's all
correct.
you get.
Look, there's an E below all of the common grading scale letters, and that's where the effort goes. But anyways, do you have anything else on your mind about it? Are you interested in reading more Avram? Would you like to see something like Revolver? Do I have to put that away in a box and save it for you?
I
might.
mean, you don't have to save it for me. I am
Mhm.
interested in it because I do like noir stuff. It's just, I don't know. It's something that usually doesn't come up in my I don't know, view, because I'm
Mhm.
usually looking at sci-fi and fantasy instead of
Oh yeah.
give me that noir.
Especially because like good noir is kind of tough to find these days, especially in the pulps, which I mean that's my area of expertise. I much prefer the pulps to massive tomes, so it's tough to find this type of short and relatively dense content.
Yeah. Because most of the dense content I've come across are just like the books that are rivaling the Bible.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of authors approach density from the idea of just having a lot of background or just a lot of scenes or a ton of dialogue instead of layering their themes correctly to make something, I'd say, I'd say it's similar to a cake where you could just stack layer on layer, or you could make the cake not only layered, but also rich and dense in the construction of it. Excuse me, just from, you know, making it a solid cake to begin with. Maybe that's a terrible analogy. It might be, could
I was
be.
gonna say about like layering, because I've done a lot of
Yeah.
cake decorating and
Mhm.
baking. And just like, oh yeah, you can just slap a layer on top of a layer, but usually you want to put down some icing, or you could do like a little
Yes.
nice little layer of caramel or some kind of fruit
Mhm.
thing.
Now, if the
And now I'm thinking
actual
about cake.
layers, if the layers are made out of angel food cake, it's still going to be fluffy and not going to have the density that you want versus something like a German chocolate. And now I'm getting you interested in cake. And well, we've hit a half hour worth of yapping at each other that I think has been mostly recorded. That would be really funny if it wasn't. It would not be funny. I hope that we have no audio issues and we can pray to whatever divine, strange alien may be blessing us with these signals. But in the meantime, Ray, it's been lovely to see you. It's been lovely to talk to you. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And for those of you at home, I hope you tune in for the next episode of the Avram Davidson universe. Give a lot of love to us here in the comments, to Ray. Ray's work is going to be posted in the description here. A link to their paintings. I believe that you currently have commissions open.
A little bit. It depends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have very, very, very limited availability. So
Limited availability and a great work ethic, a great work output. So I hope to see you back here. I hope to see you picking up work from Ray. That would be lovely. We'd love to show our support for our fellow sci-fi heads. And I will see you all next time. You have a lovely day, Ray.
you too.
And you at home.
Oh, I suppose God only knows. It sounds like a story to me, some crazy fable that you would not believe.